Okay, looks like we are live now. Facebook, YouTube, and LinkedIn.
Woo!
The only thing not covered is MySpace, but we're going to do that later.
Yeah, let's get back to MySpace.
We got Jared Jones, Russ Hill from Partners in Leadership. We wanted to walk you all through a quick process here in a quick live on YouTube, Facebook, and LinkedIn around how do you accelerate meetings and decision making so that it doesn't you don't have that experience. Jared, maybe you've had it of sitting in a meeting where you're like, I think this is a waste of time.
I've never been in a meeting where I thought this is a waste of time. I don't know.
Yeah, right. Of course not. We've all been in that situation before. So how do you, what process do you follow to make sure that doesn't happen? So we want to introduce you to a process we call the leadership alignment process. This has been developed over 3 decades of work at our firm with clients in all kinds of industries. Jared, let's dive in and go to step number 1.
Yeah, step 1 is participation. This is about getting the right people in the room and the fewest number of the right people. Have you ever had a process that had too many people in the decision-making process? It doesn't work. And you also don't want the wrong people. You don't want people that are missing. You know, you make a decision, then you have to go back and say, well, we can't execute this because we still need to talk to so-and-so and so-and-so and so-and-so. So you're stuck, you're paralyzed by it. You have to then go do all these workarounds to get to the point where you can actually move. So getting the right people in the room, that's what the participation space is all about. That step is all about.
Yeah, a couple questions I ask when I'm considering this participation step, and that is who do I need to listen to? Who do we need to listen to? Whose voices need to be represented so we make the best decision possible? The second question is, who's this going to impact? Yep. Who is this decision going to impact? We can't invite everybody into your point, Jared, but are there departments or are there areas of the company, are they represented in this discussion? Okay, step number 2 is this one. Let me switch screens over here, go to this one. So accountability. Oh, this is probably my favorite one. This one and the next one, step number 3. So accountability, the decision maker is identified. Have you ever been in a meeting where you log in? Let's say it's Zoom. It's in this virtual world, Zoom, Microsoft Teams, or maybe WebEx or whatever. You log into the meeting and you're wondering, who's the decision maker? Who called this meeting? Who's the decision maker in this meeting? And what's the decision
I love that
we're trying to make?
How many times have you been in a meeting? You're like, I don't even know what we're doing in this meeting. Like, we're talking about stuff, but what's the outcome we're trying to get to here?
So one of the beautiful things about this COVID-19 world, there's so much that sucks and is terrible about it, but there are a few things that, it's helped us as individuals or organizations. One of the things that's good about this virtual world we live in now is when I find myself in that kind of a meeting where I don't know who the decision maker is, and I don't know what the decision is. Have you met that button on Zoom yet that says, leave the meeting?
Leave meeting.
Oh, it's beautiful power. Boom, I hit that. I don't know who the
usually red, which helps.
I know. So I don't know who the decision maker is, and I don't know what decision we're trying to make. So it's a total waste of time for me to be in this meeting. So the decision maker, by the way, decision maker is not always according to seniority, right? I might delegate it out.
And sometimes you should delegate it out. There's somebody who knows more about it or has more experience with it. The other thing that's important about this is teams don't make decisions. Leaders make decisions.
So true.
Teams are terrible at making decisions. You get into this analysis paralysis and you spin and you spin and you take 3 times as long as you would have when you get stuck in that mode. So getting past that, it just accelerates everything. And that leads you into the next step, which is discussion. Discussion is people will talk until they feel heard. They'll keep talking until they feel heard. You can have people coming up with the same thing over and over and over. You feel like you've moved on, but they keep bringing it up. Why do they bring it up? Because they don't feel heard. Because they're thinking, if you'd heard me, you'd be agreeing with me. It's kind of a human nature 101 thing we all tend to do. So you've got to be able to convince people they've been heard so they can say, okay, I'm okay if this decision goes a different route because you considered what I was saying in the decision process. So that part's critical.
Yeah, a couple additional things I'll add to that being heard piece, Jared. Employee engagement is so much driven by whether or not I feel heard. People who aren't engaged at work, members of your team or members of an organization who are simply clocking in and clocking out, they're not coming to work with their hearts and their minds. They're not fully engaged. Most of the time, what our experience shows us is it's because they don't feel like anyone's listening to their ideas.
Right.
They've raised their hand before. They've spoken up. They've shared ideas. And guess what? Nothing changed. No one implemented it. Nothing happened. They shared their feedback. No changes happened. And so this being heard is a big piece. The other thing I'd say is pay attention, especially with introverts, because we're extroverted, in case you can't tell. And a lot of leaders are. But there are people in the Zoom meeting or Microsoft Teams meeting or in the organization who have great ideas, who need to be heard in that decision-making process, but who we have to call out. We have to pull that opinion out of them. So let's go to the next step, which is ownership. So now that we've been heard and now that a decision has been made, the next step is, well, what happens after we leave the room? What happens after we log out of Zoom, out of the meeting? So in so many organizations, when the meeting's over and the decision's been made, what happens in the hallway or on the cell phones or texting afterwards? Oh, I would have never made that decision. Yep. We start sabotaging the decision, second guessing it, distancing ourselves from it. That's what happens in an organization that's moving slowly, and an organization or on a team where the culture is not healthy. And so we have to take ownership of the decision as if we made it ourselves. Now, there are ethical exceptions to this that we want to acknowledge, but they're rare. But that is a category that this doesn't apply to. In 99.9% of situations, it's just agreement is different than in alignment.
Yeah, and how you go into a meeting is equally as important. Like, think about that. If you go into a meeting and you have, say you're a leader and your team comes to you and says, hey, I know you're going to that important meeting. Make sure you make this point and get this for us, boss. And if you say to your team, all right, I'm going to go take the hill for us, and you go into the meeting and then you get introduced to new information you didn't have before, now you've got to come back to your team and you've got this uncomfortable conversation to have. And it's, well, I didn't get it done. But so then you're almost tempted to say, well, I didn't agree with it, but here's what the team decided to do. And now you've just licensed your team to not own that decision. So be careful about how you go into the meeting. Don't go in already having made your decision or having made or solidified your point of view. Go in flexible and tell your team you're going in flexible so that you don't have to come out and defend a point that you said you were going to have going in.
Well, I think, Jared, what's important there, you can lean, obviously, a direction, right? You've got a position, you've got it, but you're open to hearing. And the same thing's true. Great leaders, effective leaders will go into the meeting. And oftentimes I might even start the meeting, Jared, saying, I'm leaning this direction. This is the decision I think I'm going to make. And so I've called this meeting today. It doesn't have to be a long one. It's just the last one before we actually make the decision. I want to give everybody one final chance to be heard. Is there anything we haven't considered before we make this decision? Because I'm leaning this direction. Wow. Think about the experience you create and the culture that is for your team. They're like, wow, he or she, they always tap into us before they make the decision. Okay, let's go to step number 5.
Communication is all about telling people why, what, and when. What's the why, what, and when around this decision? Why'd we make it? What's going to be involved, and when's it need to happen by, so that people can be really clear on that. And then making sure that that communication is happening regularly enough so that it's not missed. And you've got to have different modes and different ways. It's not just send out the one email and hope it's done. Send out an email, put something on the wall, do a video, make sure that they can't miss it. It's hitting all the buttons that you need to hit when you're communicating it.
When you're communicating, another piece in there is interpretation. Interpret the decision, Jerry, as you're talking about, so that I know, oh, you talked to those departments. Oh, you considered those things. Oh, this was the process. So often a lack of alignment in an organization or on a team happens because we as leaders send out a communication that is insufficient. It announces the decision. It gives no line of sight or input or information about the process you followed or who you talked to or listened to.
When you don't interpret it, will people go to best case or worst case scenario?
It's a great point.
Every time they go to worst case scenario.
Yeah, it's a great point.
If you don't interpret it, you're going to leave it to worst case scenario.
Yeah, so the final step 6 here, you all, is follow up. Here's what happens. You might have alignment in the meeting when everybody exits the Zoom meeting or walks out of the room, but how long does it take for that alignment to get screwed up? Right? Yeah, it's a pothole and you're out of alignment. So you things change out in our team environment and with customers and internally. And so the last step is around follow-up. You just got to check for alignment continually. Make sure that you're checking in with people so that you can do what's needed. You can give them the information or interpretation that's needed to keep them in alignment. So you might screenshot this process. These 6 steps might take a picture of it with your cell phone. This process is on the wall of our conference room in our firm in Southern California, because when we're having meetings, back when we used to sit around a table and do that, we can look to the wall and go, okay, those are the 6 steps. Have we skipped any of them before we make this critical decision?
And Russ, I'll just add one thing on that last step of follow-up. Consensus is a mirage. It doesn't ever really exist. You have to maintain alignment. That's what you're really talking about. Consensus is not something we should be shooting for. We need alignment. We don't need agreement. They're different. And when we can get alignment, we can have disagreement and actually have a robust conversation, but still get alignment in moving forward. So we confuse ourselves into thinking we need consensus when really what we need is alignment.
100%.
Because you're going to have disagreement. That's never going to go away. And you should expect that. That's the diversity of thought and perspectives that we need to encourage.
Throughout our live with you this afternoon or today, whenever you end up watching this, the recorded version, some of you will see, we've been putting on the screen this free mini course that we've made available. I recorded it. It's available at growthroughdisruption.com. It's the latest offering from us at our firm. We've been doing live online, these free Zoom sessions with thousands of leaders participating from across the world every Tuesday at 1 o'clock Eastern, 10 o'clock Pacific. We're putting out white papers. We're putting out articles. One of our latest steps is this free mini course that I recorded around the 5 steps to grow through disruption. What's the difference between a team that's paralyzed right now, that's giving into all the uncertainty, overwhelmed by the amount of uncertainty and disruption they're experiencing, and the team or leaders or organizations who are using this moment to adapt and transform and change and are actually going to emerge from this disruption with more market share, or leaders with greater influence inside their organization, or with better results or faster speed to market. We've recorded our insights as a firm of what we've learned, these 5 steps to grow through disruption. You can access that by going to that domain, growthroughdisruption.com. All right, Jared, I think that wraps it up.
Yep. Thanks, everybody.